Hello everyone and welcome back to the Purveyor in Fallout 76. Today we're going to spend 1,000 scrip. Well, no, technically it's 990 scrip because that's just how the numbers shake out, but we're going to spend it on the mystery pick. So we'll get a combo of armor, melee, and ranged weapons and see if we get anything good. Now, by the time you see this, the sale's going to be over, but it was a pretty good one. Not only was there a mystery pick, but also, you got 25% off that mystery pick, so the value was pretty good. You'll have to be the judge on what actually dropped. Remember, if you like videos like this one, be sure to hit the like button, leave a comment, and most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss any of the Fallout 76 videos I upload every week on the channel. Alright, let's get into it and see what Mama Mumbles thinks of us today. Alright, so we'll roll down to the mystery pick for 45 scrip apiece. And we are fully loaded on scrip, just enough to max out as many rolls as we can here. And our first roll is interesting. Okay, it's a 2-shot submachine gun with faster fire rate and 90% reduced weight. So this is an interesting roll. The submachine gun, not the most desirable of weapons, but it's still an automatic rifle, so for any commando build it can be useful, and you can put a suppressor on it, so if you're a stealth commando, that's good too. Faster fire rate is always good, that's going to help bring up the DPS of the weapon, and this weapon has a decent fire rate to begin with, so that little boost is very useful. 2-shot, I've never been a huge fan of the 2-shot effect because of the accuracy penalty you pay. However, since all the nerfs, 2-shot didn't really get hurt very much by those nerfs just because of the nature of the effect. So it's kind of risen in the ranks of desirability a little bit. So this one could be an interesting one to play with. That little bit of extra damage might be worth the trade-off in accuracy. 90% reduced weight. This one's always a bit of a misnomer. 90% reduced weight, yeah, if there's no mods on it and everything's working properly, but we don't usually truly get that much of a reduction, and you can see at 4.9 pounds, it's definitely not reduced by 90, but that's okay. What's next? We've got a Stalker's Fire Axe with swing speed and extra strength. So those of you who have watched my other script videos know how much I detest the Stalker's effect. I think it's completely useless on everything, but it's even more useless on a melee weapon. Now, what saves this one are the secondary and tertiary effects. You've got faster swing speed, which is exactly what you want on a melee weapon. That helps the DPS, and that can be the difference between life or death. If I can get that second or third swing in really quickly, that makes a big difference. Extra strength makes it do a little more damage, so even though it's Stalkers, not the end of the world. Just don't use it in VATS and you're fine, or just wait till you're in combat to use it in VATS and it's not too bad. So because of the second and third effect, that makes this a pretty solid item, and that's something to remember when you're shopping at player vendors and things like that. Sometimes you'll see an item like this, overlook it because of the primary effect, but really, the second and third ones can make it pretty useful on its own. And our next roll is Zealot's Robot Armor with increased AP refresh and the Cavalier effect, so 75% chance to reduce damage while sprinting. So here's another one with 2 really good second and third effects and a not super desirable primary effect. So the Zealot's effect, very situational. You can use it, you might be a full health build that's kind of putting together a hodgepodge of different sort of slayer effects on armor. So you could do maybe a scorched, super mutants, a troubleshooters, and just sort of have a general damage reduction from everything. And this piece would fit well into that because you've got AP refresh, which is always useful. You get diminishing returns after a while, but hey, it might save you a perk point somewhere, so not one to be overlooked. And the Cavalier effect is also pretty good, especially for things like daily ops, where you tend to be running through the whole thing, and getting that extra little bit of damage reduction is a good thing to have. So don't absolutely love this one because of Zealots, but Again, that second and third effect make it pretty useful. And next up, we've got a Mutant Slayer's 10mm submachine gun with fire rate and less VATS AP cost. So, here again, this seems to be the day of the good second and third effects. So, here, fire rate, always good. That's going to help your DPS overall. Less VATS AP cost helps you take more shots in VATS. That's great on a weapon like this. Mutant Slayers, not the most desirable of effects, but super mutants are an enemy that you're going to face a lot, especially when you get into high levels. You're going to farm West Tech and do things like that where you see lots of super mutants. You're going to do daily ops where super mutants are predictable. And this weapon is great for stuff like that because it shoots cheap ammo. Overall, you know, is it the greatest thing in the world? No, but not bad. What's next up? Okay. All right, now this one's garbage. Exterminator's marine armor with endurance and reduced falling damage. So, Exterminator's highly situational effect, and I would say probably the most useless of the situational effects. There just aren't a lot of times when you're going to be facing bugs and mirelurks in large numbers, that certainly not enough that you would want to build an armor set out of it, and this one doesn't have useful second or third effects to save it. Endurance gives you a little more health now, but it's not much. It's pretty insignificant. And reducing falling damage, honestly, most of us are running marsupial with bird bones by the time you get well into the game, so that's just not very useful. So this one, unfortunately, is a total dud. Let's move on. All right, and Stalker's Gatling Laser. Okay, so another dud. So once again, Stalker's effect. I hate the Stalker's effect. I'm looking forward to see if it can be useful once they've fixed some of this VAT stuff in the next big patch, but as of now, it's not useful. VATS is not reliable enough that you can assume that this effect will actually do what it says. And on a heavy gun, it's certainly not useful. Why would you want to trade half your AP for 100% VATS accuracy for a weapon that only does, as you can see, 61 damage per shot? And this is my heavy gunner. This is my low health heavy gunner with all the heavy gun perks maxed out. So not a very useful effect here. And bashing damage, always a useless effect. Bashing damage is extremely weak in Fallout 76, so increasing it by 40% doesn't do anything. If you multiply nothing by 40%, you still end up with nothing. You know, I guess technically it's slightly more than nothing, but not much. 50 damage resistance while aiming is a perfectly fine thing to have, but you're not going to lug around a heavy piece of equipment like this just for 50 damage resistance while you're aiming it. So this one is going right back in the Scrip bin. That's for sure. Let's see what's next. Come on, roll something good. Okay. So this is one of those pieces that is good. The effects are decent, but the item itself is not. So unyielding is always good. Even if you're not running an unyielding build or a low health build, having unyielding armor for sale in your vendor, it's always going to move. It's very popular. Unfortunately, it's wood armor, which just isn't very good. Extra perception is fine, but realistically, when you're doing an unyielding set, you've boosted up your special stats to the point where that extra perception doesn't do a whole lot for you. And junk item weight reduction, I guess if you're somebody that just carries around tons of junk all the time, it could be useful, but who does that? Realistically, you pick up junk, you scrap junk, you dump it in your stash or your scrap box, and you move on with life. You're not usually carrying around a ton of junk with you. So, not really super useful effects here. Unyielding is always great, but not on wood armor. I know there's some people out there that really like it, but I am not one of them. Let's move along. And next up, we've got more armor. This one is Assassin's Armor on Scout Armor with extra charisma, and we receive less limb damage. So, the big selling point on this one, I would say, is the Assassin's effect. If you're into PvP, there aren't a ton of PvP players in Fallout 76, but Hey, maybe that changes over time. Maybe something interesting comes out with it, and that would be fine. But for now, there is a small PvP community in Fallout 76, but it's not. That said, if you are in it, then Assassin's Armor is a good move. A whole set of that can equal some really solid damage reductions in PvP. This one here, though, the big selling point is that it's Scout Armor. So the great thing about Scout Armor is you go to the Enclave vendor, you buy the mods you want, and you get where you need to go. That's pretty useful, so you can put some good stuff on this and turn it into really good armor regardless of the legendary effect, but this is a much better piece. So, Unyielding Marine Armor, 25 poison resistance, and junk item weight reduction. So, just like the other piece of Unyielding Armor, the junk item weight reduction isn't that useful, but the other two effects are. Unyielding boosts up our special stats when we're at low health. That's definitely a good thing to have. So yeah, that's exactly what you want. Marine armor is pretty decent armor to begin with, especially once you mod it a little bit. But here, your second effect, the poison resistance, that's also really useful, especially if you fight a lot of Scorch Beasts or Scorch Beast Queens. Just a little bit of poison resistance goes a long way when it comes to their area poison attacks that do damage over time. So that's a pretty good one to roll. And next up, we've got Mutant Slayer's Urban Scout Armor. So, Scout Armor, still good. Go to the Enclave vendor, get the mods you want, whether you want Dense or something else to put on it. There's lots of useful things you can do there to boost up the damage resistance too. So, not in love with the fact that it's Mutant Slayers, but there's uses for that. Increased AP refresh, that's always a good thing to have. And food, drink, and chem weight reduction of 20%. So that's really good too. People do carry food, drinks, and chems all the time. That's not something you're regularly dumping off necessarily. So that's a very useful weight reduction. AP refresh is awesome. Mutant Slayers is situational, but super mutants are a common situation, especially if you run a lot of daily ops. It's predictable. So you can add this to a Mutant Slayer set that you might keep around just for daily ops. So definitely not a bad roll. But let's see what's coming up next. We've got a Mutants Exploding 10mm submachine gun with damage resistance while aiming. So this one's interesting. The Mutants effect, it's only a 10% damage increase. It's not a lot, but you also don't have any penalty for it. Realistically, by the time you get to level 50 plus, you're gonna be running with a bunch of mutations. Everybody's got them. So this is basically just a free 10% damage. Could it be a little more interesting if it did more damage with more effects? I hear that a lot. Yeah, it could, but at the same time, this is a really easy one because you don't have to give anything up for it. The explosive effect, that's definitely helpful. That gives us extra damage, and more importantly, it gives us area damage, so that makes it easier to tag big mobs. That's where a weapon like this is going to be really useful. Take an event like Radiation Rumble, where you've got big mobs of ghouls and you've usually got lots of players around. This thing shoots cheap ammo, load it up, go to the event, spray everything down, tag everything, get tons of XP. That's where a weapon like this is really going to be useful. So, not a bad roll at all. I'd love something better than mutants, but I can live with that. The explosive effect is certainly useful. Damage resistance while aiming is fine too, but let's see what's next. And this one, yeah, this one's not good. Here we've got a Zealot's Pipe Wrench with limb damage and 90% reduced weight. The best thing about this weapon is the reduced weight, because I only spent 45 script to get it in the mystery pick, and I'll be able to trade it back in for 40, and it won't take up a whole lot of weight while I store it. So that's fine. Scorched, yeah, I guess you know if you run a lot of queens, the Zealot's effect can be useful for you, but realistically, you're not taking a pipe wrench to a queen fight. Limb damage on a melee weapon, not the most useless thing in the world, but also not super desirable. So sadly, this one is probably just gonna get stuck in the stash and trade it in for Scrip when I get low again soon. And next up, we've got Troubleshooter's Urban Scout Armor with Charisma and Weapon Weight Reduction. So, Troubleshooter's another situational effect. Don't love the situational effects, but there are some that are more useful than others, and Troubleshooters is one of them. So you've got predictability there. You know you're going to see robots in daily ops. So building a set of Troubleshooter's armor is not a stupid thing to do. That's very useful. Plus, you've got nuke silos, you've got encrypted. Troubleshooters is probably the most useful of the situational defense effects on armor. So bear that in mind. Extra charisma, that's not very helpful as a legendary effect. I guess it'll help us save a couple of caps at vendors, but that's really about it. Weapon weight reduction, however, is very useful. Reducing your weapon weights by 20%, especially if you're a rifle build where you don't have any perks to help with that, that's definitely a useful thing to have. So this isn't bad at all. Plus, it's scout armor, so mods are easy. You just got to save up some caps. Definitely not a bad roll at all. I'm sure I can use that on one of my characters I run daily ops on a lot. So we'll hold on to that one and move on to the next roll here. What do we have? We've got a fixer. Okay. Unfortunately, it's an exterminator's fixer. So extra damage to mirelurks and bugs. Yeah, we've talked about that. Just not a situation you find yourself in very often. However, we've got an interesting second and third effect. Extra VATS hit chance is always useful, and 50 damage resistance while aiming, so if you are aiming manually, it can give you a little something. The reality with the fixer, while this one isn't a very great effect, the fixer itself is a solid weapon to begin with. I spent a lot of time running a non-legendary fixer as my main weapon on my stealth commando, and it did very well. So even just getting a couple effects like damage resistance while aiming or VATS hit chance is still good on a weapon like a fixer. So if you're a stealth commando, if you have a fixer but you don't have a legendary one, something like this, is it the greatest thing ever? No, but it's still an improvement, so that's good. And then this is the opposite of that. So here, this is one of the most disappointing kinds of rolls you can get. We've got scout armor, which is good, AP refresh, which is awesome, food, drink, and chem weight reduction, which is awesome, but then the primary effect ruins the entire piece. Nocturnal is garbage. It is terrible, it is useless, it is absolutely awful, and they need to either remove it or change it. Getting a legendary item should be a good thing. Nocturnal isn't a good thing. It does give you more damage and energy resistance at night, but it increases as the night goes on, so you never really, you only have the full effect for a very brief time, and then during the day, you take a negative effect to it. So what's the point of that? That just ruins this. This would have otherwise been a very good roll. Sadly, it's got Nocturnal, so it's guaranteed to go back to the Scrip bin. Let's move on. What do we have next? Come on, Mama Mumbles. Give us something good here. You can do it. Okay, this is definitely better. All right, so here we've got a bloodied Gatling laser with VATS hit chance and 90% reduced weight. So the VATS hit chance, not in love with that effect on a heavy weapon. I'm sure there are some heavy gunners out there that use VATS. I'm not one of them. As much as I like VATS on rifles and pistols and things like that, I don't have enough agility. I don't have enough AP for my heavy guns to really make that particularly useful. But bloodied is always a good effect. That's going to help give us more damage when our health is low, and absolutely always a useful effect. And then 90% reduced weight makes this thing a lot easier to lug around. So that's good. Once you put some mods on it, it will affect the weight a little bit, but overall it's still going to be fairly easy to carry. This is a great weapon for a bloodied heavy gunner, not because it's so good, because it isn't. You can see the damage. The damage is not good on this weapon. Energy weapons are or laser weapons in particular, are ridiculously underpowered in Fallout 76, and Bethesda just seems hell-bent on never fixing that. But for what it's worth, it's still useful. It's got good DPS. It uses fusion cores for ammo, so if you're a power armor build, It's really easy with the reduced weight to carry this thing around, use it for some basic farming when you get low on ammo on other things. Now, this one is also not bad at all. So it's a bloodied radium rifle. So we've got the bloodied effect for more damage at low health. That's useful. VATS critical shots doing more damage is also very useful. And that synergizes really well with the third effect, which is 25% less VATS AP cost. So I did a video a while back with an Executioner's radium rifle that I ran without a suppressor because I don't have the suppressor mod, because mods for the radium rifle, for whatever reason, are just impossible to get. Once again, another thing that's most likely a bug that's just been overlooked for 2 years, and at this point we can just write it off as something that Bethesda's never going to fix. So with all that bitching and whining out of the way, this is a pretty good roll. Even without a suppressor, you can go in fast and loud with something like this, especially if you're a VATS critical build, because when you do that, you can build to generate lots of criticals. So that's what you want. You get lots of criticals. This gives you lots of critical damage. And then the less VATS AP cost makes it so that you can keep hitting those. Really solid roll there. And this one's not bad either. Here we've got a Mutant's Gauss rifle with VATS hit chance and VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. VATS hit chance, I think, is a really, really useful effect. It makes it a lot easier to target weak spots in VATS, which generates extra damage. You can target heads, so you can hit hard and do a lot of extra damage that way. The Mutant's effect, yeah, it's only 10%, but remember, this is a Gauss rifle. 10% on something like a Gatling laser is 5 or 6 points of damage. 10% on something like this is 20 or 30. So mutants on a heavy hitting weapon is a lot more useful than it is on something lighter. So this is not a bad one. Would I prefer an anti-armor or bloodied or something like that? Sure, of course I would. But this one isn't a bad one. The secondary and tertiary effects synergize well together. So not a bad roll. Not the greatest thing in the world, but certainly not bad, especially if you are a VATS sniper build. And we've got a few rolls left. Here we've got an Executioner's Mr. Handy Buzzblade with limb damage and reduced weight. So this one is kind of interesting. I think I rolled one of these somewhere, something similar to this before, and maybe passed it off a little bit, but this one's kind of interesting. The Executioner's effect is not loved by many. However, on a weapon like this, it might be just the right thing. The Executioner's effect is going to be most useful on a weapon that does a little bit of damage per hit, but hits really fast. So that's exactly what this does. It hits rapidly, but for tiny bits of damage at a time. So something like this, buzzsawing against your enemy that might take, 5 seconds to kill them normally. Well, now with this, maybe it only takes 3.5. Because you're getting extra damage for that whole almost the entire last half of their health bar. So that's useful. The reduced weight effect makes it a lot easier to carry around, so you can just whip it out and use it for basic farming at some point. So that's useful. The limb damage part, yeah, that's not as useful, but maybe it is. Maybe it is, but I don't know. This one could be worth playing around with. I'm interested to see how this one handles and see how useful Executioners might be with that one. Let's see what else we've got here. We've got an Assassin's Shish Kebab with reflects 50% melee damage back while blocking and +1 strength. So with a Shish Kebab, the real benefit here is that the weapon exists at all. You have the Friendly Fire perk under Charisma. If you equip that and you do an event like Free Range or Riding Shotgun or Radiation Rumble where you have NPCs that you need to keep alive, you can use that with a Shish Kebab to heal them after they take damage. That's very useful. Other than that, the Shish Kebab is pretty underpowered, so not a super useful weapon as a whole, but it's useful for that. So in my opinion, The most important effect you can get, the best effect you can get on a shish kebab is 90% reduced weight to make it really easy to just sort of keep in your back pocket, put that effect on when you do those events and pull it out and use it. So this one, not the best situation to have. With that said, it does look cool when you use it. Unfortunately, melee damage, reflecting melee damage while blocking. I've had people tell me blocking is very useful. I've never really done a lot of melee in Fallout games, but I did recently do a melee build. You haven't seen it yet, but I have done an unarmed build, and I've got that character up to level 130 or something, I think, and I've never blocked once, so I don't see that as useful. Maybe you disagree, and that's okay. And wow. Okay, so here, this is completely useless in every way. Robot armor is fine, but it's nocturnal, so that ruins it. Extra perception, that's fine. It gives you a little more VATS accuracy, but that's really about it. And then the ability to breathe underwater, well, who cares? At what point in Fallout 76 do you need to breathe underwater? Where is that? Where is that even a thing in this game? So, sadly, this one is very close to hitting the trifecta of trash. It's got +1 perception, so we won't quite give it that award, but we will absolutely dump it in the script bin as soon as possible. Let's see what's next. I think we've got one or two more here. Nope, just one more. This is our last roll, and it's an Executioner's Sledgehammer with swing speed and extra strength. Now, you're probably rolling your eyes at the Executioner's effect here, and deservedly so. It's not super useful on a hard-hitting weapon like this one. But there are times when it's effective. You know, the downside to it on something like this is most things that you fight, you're going to kill in 1 or 2 shots no matter what. So the Executioner's effect isn't doing a whole lot for you, but swing speed is doing a whole lot for you. I said it before, I'll say it again. I think swing speed is the most valuable effect on a melee weapon, period. Being able to swing it faster is the difference between life and death. That makes a big difference. Extra strength gives us more damage with a melee weapon, so that's a good effect to have. Executioners, while not always useful, will be useful in certain scenarios. Going up against bosses, going up against tanky enemies that take even 5 or 6 or 7 hits, doing that extra damage when they're at lower health is very helpful. Daily ops going up against the boss there. There's a lot of situations where executioners can be useful. So it's not quite the redheaded stepchild that it used to be. With that said, would I like it better if it was something else? Maybe, but this isn't bad. Swing speed and strength on a melee weapon is always good. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to wrap this one up. So we had a couple of interesting drops, 1 or 2 really good things, a handful of really terrible things, and you know, that's just how the Purveyor goes. So not our worst visit, not our best visit, but overall, not bad. We got to have some fun. We got to see what some things looked like. And that really wraps this one up. So remember, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Till then, I'm Fisty McRib.